Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a really fascinating legal tug-of-war surrounding bureaucratic jurisdiction and public health. We're going to unpack a landmark Philippine Supreme Court decision that tackled a seemingly simple, yet incredibly complex question. Think about it. When a product is a massive economic driver but also a known health hazard, which government agency actually gets to write the rules? This isn't just about red tape. It's a profound look at how a state balances commerce and the well-being of its citizens. To really set the stage, let's take a quick trip back to 1987. That year, the Department of Health launched a national smoking control plan with a very ambitious, highly focused goal. They wanted to reduce the national prevalence of smoking by 10% within a single decade. They rolled out these massive public awareness campaigns. You might even remember the iconic Yoshi Kadiri mascot, all aimed at vividly illustrating the detrimental effects of cigarette smoking to the public.
Now, that initial 1987 effort didn't just fade away, it actually sparked decades of new legislation. But as the laws started piling up, a massive legal and bureaucratic battle began to brew between the tobacco industry and the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA. And it all boiled down to one fundamental question. Who truly has the power to regulate tobacco? Does that power belong to the agency managing trade and commerce, or the agency protecting public health?
To untangle this bureaucratic knot, here is what we'll be covering: the battle for regulation, a clash of two laws, the industry pushes back, the Supreme Court verdict, the international health obligation, and finally, why this ruling matters.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the battle for regulation and the escalating history of public health initiatives.
Things evolved pretty rapidly from that first campaign in '87. By 1992, the Consumer Act made it mandatory for cigarette packs to carry that warning we all know: cigarette smoking is dangerous to your health. Then came a major pivot in 2003 with the Tobacco Regulation Act, also known as Republic Act 9211. This created a special body called the Interagency Committee on Tobacco, or IAC Tobacco, to oversee the industry. And finally, in 2009, the FDA Act, Republic Act 9711, was passed to drastically strengthen the FDA's regulatory capacity over all health products.
Which brings us to Section 2, a clash of two laws, when bureaucratic mandates collide.
You see, all this rapid lawmaking accidentally created a massive jurisdictional tug-of-war. On one side, we have the 2003 law, Republic Act 9211. This law explicitly gave the IAC Tobacco the exclusive power and function to administer rules regarding the packaging, sale, distribution, and advertisements of tobacco. But on the exact opposite side, we have the 2009 law, Republic Act 9711, which gave the FDA broad regulatory authority over all health products.
You can kind of think of this situation like a Venn diagram, right, where commerce and health overlap. The government was trying to strike a balanced policy. The IAC Tobacco was formed to regulate the business and marketing aspects, basically ensuring the interests of tobacco farmers and workers weren't compromised. Meanwhile, the FDA, acting as the National Technical Authority on Health, believed it retained power over the health aspects of the product. But as you might guess, trying to draw that clean line in the real world is incredibly difficult.
Moving to our third section, the industry pushes back. The Philippine Tobacco Institute challenges FDA overreach. So, when the FDA started issuing rules to regulate them, the Philippine Tobacco Institute, an organization representing major transnational tobacco companies, pushed back hard against this dual jurisdiction approach. The PTI filed a petition in court, and their core argument was actually super straightforward. Administrative agencies cannot rewrite laws to expand their own power. They pointed directly to the 2003 law, arguing that the IAC Tobacco already had exclusive authority over their products. Furthermore, they pointed out that the FDA's own 2009 law explicitly stated it wouldn't modify the sole and exclusive jurisdiction of other specialized agencies. To the industry, the FDA was just illegally expanding its turf.
And guess what? The regional trial court actually agreed with them. The judge ruled that the FDA and the Department of Health had indeed exceeded their rule-making powers. The court declared that tobacco products were expressly excluded from the FDA's coverage by law and directed the FDA to stop enforcing its rules on the tobacco industry. This effectively stripped the FDA of its power over tobacco, setting up a massive, high-stakes legal showdown at the Supreme Court.
This sets the perfect stage for Section 4, the Supreme Court verdict, harmonizing the laws and defining health products.
When the highest court stepped in, the crucial turning point really came down to definitions. The Supreme Court looked closely at the amended definition of health products in the FDA's charter. The law states that health products refer to products that may have an effect on health which require regulations as determined by the FDA. The court ruled that because tobacco definitively and undeniably has an effect on health, namely causing death and disease, it clearly qualifies as a health product. Therefore, it falls strictly under the FDA's regulatory jurisdiction. To back this up, the court dug into the original congressional deliberations from when the FDA law was being drafted. They pulled a fantastic quote from Representative Loxton, who argued during those sessions that the FDA absolutely must retain authority over health aspects. Why? Because agencies like the IAC Tobacco simply lack the specific scientific capability to monitor health effects. The intent of the legislature was crystal clear here. The FDA is the ultimate authority as far as public health is concerned, and its powers supersede special laws when it comes to assessing a product's health impacts.
Now for Section 5, the International Health Obligation, the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control.
Because you see, this wasn't just a domestic turf war. There was another massive global factor driving the FDA's mandate and the Supreme Court's decision: international treaty obligations. Back in 2005, the Philippines ratified the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. By doing so, the government became treaty-bound to protect its public health policies from tobacco industry interference. This treaty requires state parties to implement really comprehensive measures. We're talking price and tax policies, indoor smoke protection, strict packaging and labeling restrictions, and combating illicit trade. Crucially, it specifically mandates that the FDA should not deal with the tobacco industry except to the extent strictly necessary to regulate them. The Supreme Court noted that the FDA's rules perfectly aligned with this binding international commitment.
Finally, we arrive at Section 6, why this ruling matters, establishing boundaries between commerce and public health.
So what's the big takeaway for us here? Well, this ruling did something really elegant. It harmonized two completely different laws. It proved that it's not simply an either-or situation. A product can absolutely be regulated as a legitimate article of commerce by one agency, in this case the IAC Tobacco handling the economic, agricultural, and marketing side of things, but at the exact same time, its dangerous health impacts can be strictly and exclusively policed by another agency with the actual scientific expertise, the FDA. It establishes a vital, clear boundary separating economic promotion from public health protection.
And that leaves us with a really important final thought to ponder today. As new, potentially hazardous consumer products continue to hit the market every single year, how are governments around the world going to balance the scales of economic freedom and public safety? Where exactly do we draw that line? It's a delicate balancing act for sure, but as this Supreme Court case shows us, it's a balance that requires clear definitions, scientific authority, and above all, a firm commitment to public health. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning how the rules that govern our world are actually made.